if you missed last week's What You Gotta Say, you missed the show. But we're going to continue that. We're not going to continue that conversation. We're going to get into a whole new argument. Today, we're going to be discussing the Biden campaign with the wise ones, and we're going to be discussing a new report that just came out. African American students are even further behind the education curve. Now, I'm going to do that. I'm going to bring on my co-host, Mr. ADOS, and our three wise ones. And we're going to do that in 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
You opened a small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. Maybe able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Okay, we're back. First, I want to say happy Women's History Month. Now, to bring in Women's History Month, I want to talk to my co-host, hailing from Northern New Jersey, Mr. ADOS himself, Eric Dawson.
What's going on, man? How are you? What you got to say, Vincent?
What I got to say right now is too hot outside.
Hey, it's beautiful outside, man.
We almost hit a cancellation.
Yeah, tell you, time to head to the beach, right? Road trip.
The end of sweater vest season.
Yeah.
Okay, well, since he's already in now, let's bring in our wise one. Hailing from Pennsylvania, Rabbi Seth Frisch, from the Trenton area, New Jersey, our very own Iman Kari Bashir, and none other than the Army Major, Reverend Dr. Ashelarine Lang. How you guys doing?
Wonderful, wonderful. Glad to be here.
Oh, listen, I appreciate your commitment. We were looking at putting the top down and going for a ride. I was like, hey, I got to do the show.
Yeah, it's beautiful outside.
Hey, Vincent, if we go for a ride, I got the window seat, man. You remember that?
Yeah. So, with my dad's 68 Cadillac.
That's what I say. You don't want to get caught in the middle, man. It was hot.
Yes. Okay, so let's get into it because we've got a lot to cover in a short amount of time. Biden won, but everybody talked about. He passed a $1.9 trillion bill. And although people didn't think that he would make it, he did it with very little pragmatism. The only thing that actually lost out of that bill was the $15 minimum wage.
That's not bad.
Not bad at all.
Yeah.
It's not bad that they got it done so quickly.
Yeah.
So
I believe he also the unemployment I believe was reduced by $100 if I'm correct, but still nevertheless you're bringing out a very good point that he pretty much got what he wanted.
Definitely. So what do you think about the Biden bill? Did anybody know what's in the 1.9 trillion?
Well, they've been talking about it every day, all day. And no matter what's in the bill and what's not in the bill, you're not going to make everybody happy. But there are going to be some families with some children who are going to be very happy. Some businesses who are getting a lot of money, and they're going to be very happy with their employees.
Oh,
And if you did miss anything, it was read out loud, the whole thing. you
It
know.
really was.
I know.
yeah, it was. Well, let's look at it. One of the points that I like, he actually in this bill is reducing the child poverty level by 48%.
That's amazing.
Yes.
48%, in which that is a great deal of African American poor children.
Yeah.
Not only that, we're talking about a tax credit. So when they're filing their income tax, they get a bigger tax credit for their children.
Yes. But also too, what I really like about this is that and excuse me for if I don't give the correct terminology, but they're lowering the income in order for someone to receive the tax credits, where before someone perhaps didn't qualify, now they will qualify. I think that was really huge.
Yes. Also, we're talking about Black farmers.
Yeah.
Remember Farm Aid? Guess what they got? Nothing.
You know what? But you know what I find interesting about all this? During the campaign, when Bernie Sanders was talking about the level of poverty and what we needed to do regarding democratic socialism, you had many people who are applauding this now, calling him a communist, calling him a socialist, when he was talking about how when he was pushing for Dr. King's Poor People's Campaign, right? And now all of a sudden, we're all good with democratic socialism. We're all good with handing this stuff out. And I just want to point out that, wait a minute, let me finish my point. I want to point out the hypocrisy of it, right? Because I believe that there should be more. I believe there should be a lot more, right?
Yeah. And
but
people believe that you should be able to pay for it.
I'm sorry?
And people will also believe that since you want more, you should be able to pay the taxes on it.
I think COVID-19 changed the game. COVID-19 changed the game. You can't tell a bootless man to pull up his bootstraps in the famous words of Dr. King. And so you can't look at a pandemic and see how it's devastated the world and not associate the government.
But we were in COVID-19 during the campaign.
Yeah, but that's when everything was a hoax. That's when it was going to disappear. That's when it was just going to go away magically.
Well, if I might, can I just interject one thing here? And I often tell something from the outside. Like I look at a book and I look at the book's cover and I say, maybe that's indicative of what's on the inside, how it's been painted. And I listen to Lindsey Graham, our good friend from South Carolina, and I hear him say, this is just reparations, which is, if you want to talk about pulling the race card and throwing some serious water on this.
Reparations for who though?
Well, he's racist. I mean, he's clearly, he says this is just reparations. And so it has nothing to do, I mean, for him, Dr. Lang, for him, it's not about, it's not about COVID. It's not about helping the poor, not the poor. I'm sure he'd be happy to help the white poor, that might vote for him.
It was the first bill that they passed. Talk about socialism. We gave corporations billions of dollars.
Right. And so
but when you're going to help people who aren't big Wall Street executives. In fact, the biggest one that I can't stand was a guy who was in bankruptcy for his hedge fund. He got $3 million.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Vincent. Before we break our arms, patting ourselves on our back, right, or any one of our backs, just remember this. It's a 2-year window before some of those people, the likes of which, let's say, Lindsey and his friends, there's a very good chance in 2 years we're going to see this window begin to close, if not close altogether. And they're going to be throwing things at us. They're going to be throwing things at us that talk about, about reparations and about, the black people this and their Jew friends, that are helping them, and all, they're going to be throwing a lot of darts at us. And it's a very slim window. So I don't want us to be patting ourselves on the back until we start talking about shoring up the walls that are going to hold us, to hold the foundations that we need to grow on, because this is really, as far as I'm concerned, this is the only beginning and it is in danger.
Okay, Iman, I know you want to get in, but I'm going to say this and I'm going to pass it to you. Let's look at the hypocrisy. Not one Republican voted to get this passed. Now, last night, 14 Republicans tweeted how wonderful it is, how hard they've been working for their constituents. Go ahead, Iman.
Yeah, which again, it shows the hypocrisy. It really makes you angry, really. But also in relationship to what Eric had mentioned about people stating that, socialism, communism, when Bernie Sanders and others may have been promoting some of the same concepts. In my circles, I didn't hear that. I know that that was a voice, but I believe in the inner cities and minority communities, there wasn't a whole lot of us saying that. I think we welcome the assistance, we welcome the help that was being proposed.
Okay, well, let's look at it. 120% loan forgiveness to Black farmers. That is the biggest thing that has happened to Black farmers since what? The Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Act. Black farmers have been going bankrupt at an alarming rate, yet nobody mentioned it. Black farmers have been sitting up here being undersold, selling their products to major corporations because not only are they competing with white farmers, but they're competing with Dominican, Venezuelan, and all of those other farmers.
Just Black like Queen Sugar.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We're going to do that in 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
Be right back.
Working to encourage young men and develop leaders. You focus on really developing future leaders and on mentoring as a big component of your work.
Yes, we believe in mentoring, and we believe in helping young people become real strong role models in the community. So in order to do that, we have what we call 5 pillars.
As an organization, as membership yourself, you are also looking to be those mentors, to be those role models for young
Yes.
people, for tomorrow's leaders.
Yes, actually the motto for our organization is what they see is what they'll be.
In that, you are looking for additional membership, but you're also looking for students to be a part of your organization.
Yes, I think that we're the best kept secret in town. I think that if we had more students, we could service more students. We're also looking for men to step up and be role models and mentors. Inside the program, we provide a mentoring program, a mentor training program, so the men will know how. Sometimes men want to do the right thing and mentor, but they don't know how. So we have a mentor program to teach them how to do it.
Welcome back to What You Gotta Say. We're celebrating Women's History Month, and one of my favorite women in the Bible is the prophetess Huldah, and she is hidden right into 2 Chronicles 34. And so when the scroll and the Bible was lost, shall we say, when it was found, they took it right to prophetess Huldah, and she declared, this is really the word of God. And the text says that she lived in the university. So why is she one of my favorites? Because I am a lifelong learner. I'm crazy enough to work on this second doctorate degree. So for me, I'm like Huldah, always learning, always doing something, always growing your mind. So as we continue our discussion, now we're going to talk about the Republican Party and how it has changed and reshaped over the years.
Well, the Republican Party right now has been gearing up. And what they're gearing up to do this, as the rabbi always talk about, is that we've got a 2-year window. Yes, we do. We have until the midterms to bring in more Democrats so that we can pass more bills that are making more impact and changing. We have now changed the poverty level. We've changed subsidies that have gone to farmers. We've changed the distribution of COVID in terms of economic relief that went from large corporations now to individuals and small businesses. We need to continue on that job. But as we discussed, there's always pushback. The first thing that they're doing, the Republicans are now working on voter suppression.
Hasn't that always been the case, though? That's not new, is it?
It's not new. None of this and what we're saying is new. It's just new to a certain people who've had their head up. Excuse me.
But you know, that's what's interesting about racism, that it could lie dormant. And for those who don't want to see it, they could pretend. Just like I was watching the whole, I know we're talking about something else, but we was watching the whole Meghan and Prince Harry. And I am not surprised at all about what was coming out. But then you got people who are like, oh no, that could never happen.
Well, let's just call it for what it is. The KKK in the South, if I'm not mistaken, was created and nurtured in order to put, Jim Crow down the throats of the Southern Black population, just down the throats. And it was for voter suppression. And I'm telling you, what's galling to me is that this Congress is really KKK 2 revisited, redux.
Right, but
That's all it is.
I want to say this too.
It's
right?
KKK redux.
Look, I understand what's happening with voter. I just don't want us to take our eye off of what's happening. So we look and we're trained, right, to look at what the Republican Party is doing. But I can tell you, in Essex County, in New Jersey, which is a blue state, there's voter suppression every election time. There's major voter suppression every election time. There are seniors who are intimidated, right? There are workers who are intimidated Black workers, by Black elected officials. So let us not be fooled. See, I'm telling you, so we got to call it on both sides.
Well, the only thing that stopped voter suppression to his detriment was Donald Trump. Since he announced that it was going to be a fraud, they put more people in to investigate, more people in to monitor, more people in to mandate. And then he couldn't get his heating in because they had so many people watching him, and he was shocked that he lost. Duh.
You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of the story of Esther and how when Haman wanted to hang Mordecai, when the king realized that Mordecai saved his life, it was Haman who had to walk through the streets celebrating the man he hated the most. It's amazing how life has a way of turning around.
Yeah, well, that's the whole nature of that book. It's turnaround. It's turnaround time. It shouldn't have been called Esther. It should have been called Turnaround Time here in Persia.
Well, I like to call it God having a sense of humor. But
well, Brother Vincent, since you flunked that seminary course, God does not appear in the book of Esther. Just saying. I want to talk to your professors there.
Oh, really?
The essence of all of who God is in Esther. The word God is not.
Okay, Dr. Lang, don't help him out, please. Do not help him out. Let him be on the defensive every now and then.
I was going to tell you that. But anyway, we're going to move a little forward. Now, joining us, we want to talk about some of the things that have been affected by COVID and how we need to make some changes. I was not shocked, but when COVID started and they started distance learning, I had this big, huge hope in my heart that now the children would actually because of this, be able to change the trajectory of some Black students. And because they are constantly at the bottom of the numbers, I thought that the COVID-19 would give a great deal of exposure to some of the dilemmas in which people were experiencing with their children and learning. No. What they found out in the last survey is that the Black students have now dropped 28% in terms of GPA. But with us to give us a little more insight, is because on this show, I like to bring in people who are a lot smarter than me. I'm bringing in Dr. Darrell Johnson, principal of Falks Big Picture High School. Dr. Johnson, how are you, sir?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Hello.
How are you?
How's it going?
Hey, thank you for having me on here too. I greatly appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. Okay, now there's no big secret, or maybe for a lot of people, I'm a Vaux alumni.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It used to be Vaux Junior High School. In fact, this was a world famous junior high school. This was the only high school where 8th graders flew to Russia and we beat the Russian chess masters.
Yep. Legendary chess team at Vaux.
Not only that, but we have alumni from Vaux that are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Motown Hall of Fame. We've got 5 alumni who are in the NFL Hall of Fame, 38 alumni that are in the NBA Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Yeah, impressive. I didn't know that last part.
Oh, yes. So you are now principal of what used to be the benchmark of Black excellence.
Yeah, so I am the vice principal. I'm not the head principal. I am the vice principal.
Yeah, same thing, except you don't make as much money.
You can say that.
Okay, so what are you seeing with this distance learning?
I mean, it's what many of you are seeing. It's pretty transparent. You can't really hide, what we're dealing with as educators. On one end of the spectrum, you have the trauma that COVID has, brought amongst young people in general, outside of education. And then you have the new form of innovation, as you want to call it, and the method in which to educate our young people. So 2 different spectrums, and educators across the world are trying to navigate the best way to be successful in doing what we did in the normal space. And we're learning day by day, month by month, and hour by hour that what used to work is not going to work anymore. And there needs to be new ways to look at things, and a new way to reframe the mindset. And it's happening for some, but not all.
Dr. Johnson, before Eric goes on a tyrant, I want to clear something up.
Yeah.
It has never worked.
So let me ask you a question, because Lindsey Graham is talking about reparations, right? We're talking about this COVID bill, right? From your perspective as an educator and seeing this gap widen now, right? And it's generational. Where is the repair for that in this bill?
So I don't see it, right?
I see it.
So I don't see it. So, and again, so you got to remember, education it's a trickle down effect, right? And so you have to see the broader perspective of what affects education. And so, if you don't know what connects to what, then you only can see but so much, right? And so for me, I believe that clearly, if there is not an economical framework that allows the educational system to be a priority, then I don't care what type of innovation or what you're trying to put in education, it's not going to be successful because it's not a priority in the economy system. And the reign of Donald Trump has proven that education is not important, that other things are important. And, it has been detrimental to the education field, whether you may see it or not. And the narrative has always been that, in predominantly urban schools, there is not growth happening, that there is no success happening. And to be honest with you, there was small successes under the Obama administration. We were seeing small successes in the urban community. But when funding is taken, when you have a whole regime who favors charter schools and school choice over urban communities, that does have an effect on where dollars go, and that does have an effect on how you can actually educate young people. Add that onto what's happening with the COVID-19 pandemic, and you have a bunch of educators who thought they were having small successes, pretty much running around with their head cut off.
But doctor, so again,
Yeah.
so we put that on Trump, right? We talk about Trump, but again,
Yeah.
I live in New Jersey. And our U.S. Senator, Cory Booker, was the biggest advocate for charter schools. Decimated.
I disagree with him. I disagree with him.
So what I'm saying to you again is this: we focus on Republicans and the damage that they do. We need to understand the enemy within our walls. We need to focus on that, and we don't. And they continue to run roughshod over us because they have us so fixated on those guys who have the R on their chest, who are wearing the red, and we're on the blue team. And so no matter what, right, we got to hate the red team, and we got to embrace the blue team.
And so there's people, and then there's systems, right? And so there's people who try to push different systems. And so I don't have it. So put it like this. My fight is with the systems, not the people, right? And so, for example, people like Cory Booker, he is a Democrat. He was trying to push a system that wasn't in the best interest of urban communities. Correct. And so, like, my fight, I still agree with a lot of stuff Cory Booker says, though, in general, but just I don't agree with that aspect of what he's trying to push out. And it was evident.
Dr. Johnson, are you trying to say that, just so I'm clear, are you trying to say that someone like, I hear Vincent talk about enemies, okay, and I know he doesn't mean it exactly like that, but what I want to know from you is when you say Cory Booker, and that
I don't know him like personally.
Well, you know him enough.
I know enough to know what his agenda is.
You know him more than you know Betsy DeVos. All right, so let's just say that.
Yeah, we can all say that. Yeah,
right, we can say that, and so it sounds to me that even though he pushed the wrong system, his door is sufficiently open to you or to our communities when you say to him as a professional, as a member of his community, of his state. I assume you're in New Jersey though, right?
No, I'm in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's another story. But let me just say, his door ought to be open enough to have a conversation where someone like DeVos or however you would pronounce her name, Heyman, perhaps, her door is always going to be closed. And so there are opportunities to work with certain people. It's not the system has closed you out, right?
So I disagree with that because, in the field of education, both Betsy DeVos and Cory Booker had the same mindset around education.
But is Cory open? Is Cory and others like him, are they open to having this conversation?
I don't think so.
Really?
Well, I can say this, maybe not on that particular issue, But I
Exactly.
would say he's open because I do know Cory Booker, and I've sat with him in many different meetings and things of that nature. And I can say that he does listen. And there's been a couple of issues that we were dealing with in the Islamic community that we were able to get him to see and change his thought on. So maybe that won't happen with every particular issue, but in general, I will say that he's more open than say some of the Republican politicians that.
Now,
But what I'll say is this.
before we go deeper into this hole, let us get back to the topic at hand. Why are our Black kids failing in distance learning?
I have a question for you, Doc.
But you
So,
got
Dr. Johnson, let me ask you as far as parenting is concerned, because I will tell you,
Yes.
when my son was in the second grade, we moved from Pennsylvania to Delaware, and they had a whole different math system. And I'm old school. Like we carried the one and we put it over, but they had this new math that I just didn't get, right? So as a parent, it was difficult for me to help him with homework, but my daughter understood it and she was in sixth grade, so she did it. So what are you finding from the parents and their inability to help the kids? Is that part of the challenge that we're having?
Absolutely. I think across the board. And you know what is interesting? It's not even just parents, it's educators. Because educators, most educators are parents too. And it's sort of the symbolism, hurt people. And the person who's not healed can't heal somebody else. And so you have this pandemic has hurt parents more than it's hurt the children because they have to worry about, paying bills in addition to educating the child at home. Because even though it's we have this term called asynchronous work where, students are given assignments to do work at home, but there's no teacher at home. And so there's no new policy that aligns to make sure that child is learning. So the responsibility is put on the parent. And if the parent is already hurt, they're already traumatized by this pandemic. They're worried about paying a bill. And in addition, they have to teach their child too. And some parents just break down. And so what tends to happen is, there's a lot of finger pointing. Like, how do you let your child do this? How do you let your child do that? Why don't you take responsibility for your child? When the truth be told, we use a term in education called empathize and mobilize. I think the best thing that we can do as educators, the best thing that any parent can give to a child, the best thing that we can do for each other is care and accountability, right? And so the challenge that we're learning as educators is finding the right balance of empathy and mobilization. In other words, I know that you're dealing with the situation, so I'm going to gear the curriculum and the instruction in a way that aligns with what you're dealing with, but I still got to keep the train moving. I can't allow you to just fall behind and just not do any work. Right. And so every school, whether it's in Jersey or Philadelphia, is trying to identify what this balance looks like. And it's different for everybody because everybody's responding to the trauma differently. And so what we're learning through this process is that we have to reimagine how we educate children now. And the interesting is, even when we go in this face-to-face space, the trauma doesn't go away. The face-to-face is going to come back, but that trauma that's built in the mind now. And so now our approach has to change drastically, even when students do come back into the building, as to how we're going to educate them. And it's going to come down to that balance.
So the follow-up question would be, so how are you implementing social emotional learning? Because we could talk about academics, but like you talked about the trauma, that social emotional piece, that's going to be the kids, that's going to be the parents, it's going to be the teachers. Like the teachers are probably overly traumatized trying to manage all of this. And now you want to go back in the building and they're still feeling the effects of being at home trying to manage their own kids.
Absolutely. And so our response, and I can speak from my school, right? I can only speak from my school. I know every school has their own challenge and their way of addressing these issues. But at Voss Big Picture High School, the heart of our work is built around relationships. And so the way that we design our school on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it's about instruction. On Tuesday and Thursday, it's about relationships.
Nice.
I want to know what's going on in your life. I want to know what you're dealing with. I want to know, do you have access? Do you got something to eat today? I want to know what's going on with mom, how's she doing? I'm going to check in on mom on Tuesday. I'm going to check in on the family. I'm going to check on everybody on Tuesday and Thursday. If I need to stop at your house and do a home visit, I'll do that on Tuesday and Thursday if I need to check on you. And so there's a lot more social emotional check-ins. We also have a term called resiliency specialists. I don't like to call them school counselors because they do so much more than work with students, because the way we see it, the whole child involves the village. And so I can't just heal the child. I got to heal the village. And so our counselors are not only responsible for working with the children, but working with the families. And so we do a lot of parent engagement workshops where we try to engage, like, listen, you don't have to come to this meeting because I know you got to work, but just let us know what you got going on, what you need. We'll shoot some food. We have a partnership with different organizations that actually send groceries to the home. And so if the family doesn't have time to go grocery shopping because they're working, we'll send groceries to the home. And what that does is it builds relationships. And so what that does is create consistency with attendance. Kids are coming now. There's a level of trust that's been created. And so and again, that's just an example of how we do it. But across the board, schools are learning like, okay, I can't just say we're going to learn about math today. I had to start the day with, all right, let's check in. What's everybody's temperature? You have to know what you're walking into now. And I think that that's not going to change. Even when we get back into this face-to-face space, like education is forever going to be different now, because now we got to look at the mental framework before we even get to talking about instruction, before we even get to talking about math.
I just want to know how you're not exhausted. That's what I want to know. Because that is
honestly, I'm a man of faith. You guys see, I got the God Works t-shirt. I'm with the right crew right now, so obviously I lean on that. Obviously I lean on that a lot, right? I have I'm a minister at my church, and I have a good support system. And honestly, we have intentional support systems for all educators, right? And so we establish safety care plans, self-care plans, and we encourage all educators to kind of indulge in self-care once a week. And that means get away, whatever you need to do. And kind of a luxury in the virtual space is to create this asynchronous work. Right. And so anytime you're doing asynchronous work, you're giving kids work to do independently. And during that independent time, you're kind of just resetting. Right. And in your mental frame, kind of getting yourself back together. And so, a lot of schools create this asynchronous space, but it's essentially not only to help the child work independently and get back with them later, but also to create this space to get your mind right, get your head right. And the thing is, go ahead.
I applaud you
with all of that going on. Right?
Hold on, Eric.
But I want to say this.
You're cutting off the Iman.
But let me say this, please.
You cut off the Iman, Eric.
You're cutting off the
Hold on.
Iman, Eric.
All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Iman.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. No, I just wanted to say this. I want to applaud Dr. Johnson because I think the success is going to only come if we take the humanistic approach to our academics. That's across the board. And Absolutely. I think to some degree that's missing. And also too, I do believe that since this pandemic, that in general, people have a greater appreciation for educators.
Absolutely.
I know that I do, as I relate it even to my grandchildren and all.
Right.
So thank you very much, brother. We appreciate what you're doing. I think you have some great insight. And we need the humanistic approach to accompany the academic approach as well.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Okay, Eric, if you want to make your comment, go ahead and take us to break.
Right. So you talked about systems, right? And so when the when the rabbi said, why, he doesn't understand why you're exhausted, because all of the things that you're trying to put in place are to battle against this system, right? This larger system.
Right.
And so when we look at all of the work that you do, right, in relationship to the education gap that is widening, is what you're doing treading water, or are you gaining ground and closing that gap?
I don't know yet. And I'll be very transparent with you. I think I have, and I think that's the fear for all educators. I think that's what keeps us up at night. I think, that's what has us kind of going crazy, because I think at this point we could be treading water. And I think it could potentially get worse based on funding, right? And so, COVID-19 has affected funding tremendously to the education, right? So I'm curious as to how Biden's going to support this. Everything, not even just from K to 12, but even for, colleges and school loans and things of that nature. So I'm curious as to how this is going to affect educators financially. I know that, in Philadelphia, our budgets have been drastically affected. And that's part of the reason why we focus in Philadelphia or getting our kindergarten and second graders in the building, which they are now, just based on their test scores. Their test scores were tremendously low compared to last year. And so we had to find a way just to get them into the building, because we were just very fearful of what their scores were looking like. And so again, with high school, only 60% of the students actually took standardized testing. So we can't even tell what the other 40% is doing. So we don't know if we're treading water or if we're making a difference, because half of the high school kids in Philadelphia didn't even take the test for us to see it. And so that kind of gives us the fear, like, okay, are we going to have a bunch of kids that are still going to be at the last year's grade because they didn't do anything, or are they responding to what we're trying to do? We don't know. And I think we won't know until we get back into this face-to-face space, because in the virtual space, students have black screens on. You don't know what's happening on the other side of that computer, or what students are dealing with on the other side of that computer. And so we can only do the best that we can have access to, and pray that, once we get back into the fold, we can just recover.
Now, we're going to come back with Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson, going to stay for a little while longer?
Yeah, I got some time.
Okay. And we're going to see what we can do, and what parents can do at home, and what we can do as a community to help bring back our young Black students. I'm Vincent Squire, and this is What You Gotta Say, and we'll be back. 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
To small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you gonna find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. Maybe able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Welcome back to What You Gotta Say. Leading into our next segment, we want to just recognize Women's History Month. And I have someone in particular that I would just like to highlight. And her name is Baraka Ayman, which most of you probably never heard about. But when you study Islamic history, this was an Ethiopian, a Black woman, who was the nurse of the Prophet Muhammad, prayers and peace be upon him. Actually, when we look at the seer, we look at the history, she was there when he was first born. She was there when the mother died, when the father died. Actually, she stayed with him just about his whole life. He had so much respect for her that he actually married his son to her. And I think it's important to know, because when we talk about Islam or Muslims, oftentimes we think about the Middle Eastern Arabs, but there were Black people, and in this case, a lot of Black women that had an intricate part in the development of Islam. So remember that name, Baraka, which means blessed, right? Is mother of, and then Amen. So I think that would be a good highlight and a little homework for all of you.
Thank you, Iman. Dr. Johnson.
Good evening.
No big secret. My wife is doing her second career now. She's a retired journalist from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Now she is working in the Camden school systems. And believe me, I have heard some conversations,
Yeah. Yeah.
not only from the parents, but the teachers. I mean, really going through it. What advice, or from your expertise in what you've seen, what can we do to make this better?
Yeah, so like from my experience, it's what I said earlier. It takes a village. And so what we've learned is when we can collaborate with everyone, and I'm not just talking about parents, I'm talking about community partners. There are so many community organizations that are open to help, but the lines of communication just haven't been maximized. They haven't really been leveraged to, ensure that a child is prepared and ready to learn in the virtual space. And so in our experience, we've learned that when we lean on those avenues, when we lean on making things convenient for parents, when we continue to build trust, when we open lines of communications with parents, when we're not nagging them about what their kid is doing wrong, but praising for whatever they're doing right, establishing those relationships, and then leaning on community partners as another resource for families to kind of relieve a lot of the trauma that everyone's dealing with. That's the first step to seeing increase in progression in students. That's what we've been able to see.
So what can the church do? I mean, you've got three people here, three different levels of faith. What can we do?
And it's funny you mentioned that. I've been reading this book called The Externally Focused Church. And it talks about discipleship and this idea of service and what real ministry is. And the fact of the matter is that ministry happens outside the walls. And this is the best time more than ever for churches to begin ministering for real, outside of the walls. And what I mean by that is serving. There are so many schools in need that don't realize that they can lean on churches for support. We need, I can tell you right now, my school and needs a lot of mentors. We were blessed to have Mr. Squire come join us for a Mentors Day. He mentored multiple students throughout the entire day, and our students were blessed for that. Just to have an experience to talk with a man who's had as much success as Mr. Squire's had has been a blessing, and he continues to bless us. We have an opportunity for students to have access to Dell State University just based on a conversation with Mr. Squire. And these are things that all of you have the ability to do in some capacity. And the ultimate measure of ministry is pretty much contributing to somebody's growth using the resources that God is giving you. And so, can you imagine members of churches using that platform to really engage in school communities and what difference that can make during a pandemic? The numbers would be astronomical as far as, growth in our students. And so you don't have to be an educator to pour into a student's life. Like I said, hurt people can't heal people. And if there's a lot of people that's healing in the church, that healing needs to happen outside of those four walls into the communities where people are hurting.
So so you're saying it's time for us to stop shifting the blame, stop pointing the finger, and start rolling up our sleeves?
Be about that action. That's exactly what I'm saying. And it starts with me. One of the things that we're doing at my church, I attend a small church called Response to Grace in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia. And one of our missions is really to do a self-reflection on, are we really being disciples? Are we really manifesting discipleship? Are we really going out into these streets and saying, what do you need? Not asking, waiting for somebody to come to us and say we need something. Like, we're going out to them and saying, listen, we see what's going on. We see how this pandemic's affecting you. We see what's going on. What do you need? And how can we help you? That's the start. And honestly, it's the principle. Like, once you do that, you build this sense of trust. And now they're asking, well, how can I get to know what this church is about? How can I learn more about what y'all doing? Because I've never seen anybody step to me the way that you guys have stepped to me. And that's where the growth happens. That's really where the ministry happens. And so, that's what churches can do, I believe.
When we look at some of the disadvantages, unfortunately, in some of the white households, oftentimes the level of education is higher, and relative to parents now I'm referring to, and also to the level of understanding of technology, being that everything now is a virtual. There's definitely a disadvantage. But it's something that you just said, Dr. Johnson, that the light bulb went on top of my head. What I'm going to do, inshallah, God willing, at my masjid, I'm going to get some of our educators and some of our tech people, and we're going to try to have workshops for parents so that they will be better equipped to assist their children during virtual learning. So thank you very much. Hey man,
Thank
me.
you.
Come
I want to say thank you. Because what's going to happen is that school, whoever you support, they're going to tell other schools about you. And the word's going to travel, and then you're going to see a lot more people come into your establishment, and a lot more people trying to understand. And that's really why I said at this time, while everybody's seeing the negativity, I'm seeing the beauty within the ashes. I'm seeing churches increase based on how they respond to this time right now. So it's kind of what Mr. Squire said. It's not about talking anymore. It's about being about the action and watching the growth happen. And so thank you for that.
Well, I want to say this because we're coming on a 5 o'clock hour. So for those of you who are watching us on Roku, you're going to have to now switch over to YouTube because we're going to go into a little bit of after show with Dr. Johnson, if it's okay with you, Doctor.
Yep, I got 20 more minutes for you.
Wow.
Okay, and we're
Till the bell rings.
So I want to, for those of you on Roku, I'm thanking my three wise ones, my co-host Eric Dawson and Dr. Johnson. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube, we're going to continue the conversation. I'm Vincent Squire. If God's will, we'll be back next week to discuss the issues from a Black lens. All right, Dr. Johnson, as you were saying, okay, roll up our sleeves. And Iman, I applaud you for that. And I think that we need more of you. What can we do in terms of this seminar that he wants to do to get parents to cope? I mean, because as you said, hurt people. And it really set up a light bulb in my head that, yeah, parents are dealing with this right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, just like you said, we just recently had a parent empowerment workshop. And the whole thing was just informing parents what they had access to, what they had the power to ask for, just to remind them that they have a voice. When a lot of things are facing you, you tend to play defense. You tend to do whatever you got to do to pay a bill, and it's defense to make sure the kid is learning, your child is learning, you have food. And we want to let them know that they have an offensive toolkit. You have the right to request certain things for your child, for yourself. And so having empowerment workshops where we inform families of what they have the right to ask for. You have the right for these services. You have the right to have free tutoring. You have the right to have your child in these recreational services so they're not out on the streets. Like, you have the right to do these things, and here's the information for you to do that. A lot of the times when you're dealing with so much stress, you don't have time to connect those dots. And so creating workshops that allow parents to connect the dots are really what helps them to, again, build the trust. And it kind of takes a lot of the weight off of them so that they're more effective. And so I would definitely say that, when it comes to doing workshops and seminars and things of that nature, to be straight to the point, straight, direct, informative. They have things to do. So, time is crucial to them, but give them something that can empower them to be greater, that they have access to, that will make their jobs easier.
Well, Dr. Johnson, I just have a question. What happens if you have a family, parents who they want to help their child, they want to help, their boy or girl, kind of progress, but they don't know the material that's being taught in the classrooms. And I hear you want to help them, but I'll just give you my example. If you put in front of me an algebra book, that's like me reading Greek. Well, I actually can read Greek. That's like me reading hieroglyphics. And so the truth is, there are going to be parents out there that are willing, and that's half the game right there, but they may not be able to keep up with what you are saying that needs to be work, with the work that needs to go to their children to raise them up and to help them move forward. What do you do in a situation like that? Because I can't imagine there's one or two. There's got to be quite a few people that just don't know the algebra, just like me.
Right. Absolutely. And that's a great question, Rabbi. And to me, there's two different spaces, right? The space that I just spoke about is more so around social emotional healing, special ed supports, logistical and legalized services for children. right? That's one aspect. The other aspect around instruction should be honed on more so in the schools and what they have the ability to provide. So for example, at Vaux, we're actually creating pods in Vaux. And so at Vaux Picture High School, every Tuesday and Thursday, while we focus on relationships, we do allow access for students to come into the building socially distance wise. We've redesigned our entire school so that students can come in and get one-to-one tutoring every Tuesday and Thursday. And so parents don't have to see an algebra book at all. You just got to send their kid to our school during the pods and we'll take care of the algebra book. Wow. And so and that's the way that we operate. And so again, this is one of the innovative things that we have to create to take the pressure off of the parents. And so when it comes to asynchronous work, you don't have to worry about teaching your child math or teaching your child English. We'll tell you, look, if you can get your child down to our school on Tuesday, we'll take care of the rest. Right. And that's our goal. We want to make it as easy as possible for the parents, but we also want you to know what you have access to. And so if you can't bring your child down, then we're having a conversation of, all right, how can I get you access to trans passes? How can I get you access to transportation? How can I get you access to Uber or whatever it is so that you can get your child to the location so that we can educate him? And that's the part where I talk about access and giving them that informative information for them to empower themselves. And so it's two different spectrums. In one spectrum, we give them the information to empower themselves. And in another spectrum, we take on that responsibility to make sure that child is successful.
I have a question as far as, so for your staff, have you seen like an increase or anything in suicidal ideation? That's part of my role as a chaplain. We look at suicides and just, suicidal thoughts and different things. Are you able to track that? And has it been an increase? And what have you put in place for those people who are struggling mentally?
Right. So I try to stay away from that. Because I believe in the residual trauma and I have to protect myself. We do have specially trained resiliency specialists who are counselors and psychologists that manage that avenue. As far as systematically what we have in place for teachers, we have a program at the School District of Philadelphia called the EAP. And it's a 24-hour therapy service where all you have to do is call and they'll set up a session for you to get therapeutic services and supports. And so we have that system in place. We also have partnerships with different community partners, kind of what I shared earlier. We have a Center for Grieving Children organization. I'm not sure if you guys ever heard of that organization in Philadelphia. The Center for Grieving Children we just lost a student. We just lost a student to violence. And so obviously our community was hit hard. And we had a lot of teachers dealing with depression because they used to teach the student. They were close to the student. Again, we're about relationships, so they were close to the student. And so we forced them to take time off and get those therapeutic services. And then we also have our counselors do check-ins with them just to make sure that we're receiving services. And we make sure our counselors get the services. We know our counselors are not bulletproof either. And so we make sure that they get the services that they need so that, no one is dealing with levels of depression because we understand like they're human. And so it's important that we make sure that everybody has access to that. So like I said, everyone has a self-care plan. Everyone has a safety plan as a staff member, not even just our teachers, but even our support staff, our climate and culture staff, our secretaries, everybody has some form of self-care plan so that if anything happens, that we make sure that coverage is provided and that they have the space to decompress and kind of, get themselves back in order. Wow. That was a great question, though.
Not only should we get the parents to engage into their children, even in terms of the village itself, I think they should be engaging with the parents to make sure that they're engaging with these children to get them to these things. I think that the church should be calling out to their parishioners and all of their members to see how they're doing through this. They keep saying that, everybody keeps saying that, we're in the post-Trump era. And, we've got vaccines, but still we have not addressed the full trauma and impact that what this has caused on the psyche of America, on the psyche of Black America, and especially on the psyche of young Black children. It's alarming to see the rates of children now failing. And it looks like, and now it looks like they're saying that the parents just don't give a crap.
And that's not true.
Well, with the statistics showing that a lot of the children are lagging behind in the educational arena, what discussions are being made relative to passing them to the next grade or possibly keeping them back or what's What's the
That is-
discussion that's going
that's
on?
Summer school?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And so there's two things with that, right? The first issue is when you look at data, when you look at statistics, especially during the COVID pandemic era, you can't really put too much into it. And the reason why is because it's happening in a virtual space. And so anytime you're testing anybody and there's no adult in the room, you don't know how that child took that test. You don't know if they're looking at Google. You don't know if they're, looking up answers another way. You can't really see, you really can't tell that they took that test with fidelity, right? Then the other case is that not every student took the test. You're right. Not every student has access to Wi-Fi. Not every student in Philadelphia, is in school right now, right? And so like a lot of the information that we have is based on students who participated. And then the students who participated, there were no teachers in the room when the student was taking the test. So we don't know if the parent took the test. There's so many different variables that could have happened that could have really messed with that data, right? So number one, is the data really the right data, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is there is a lag, right? There's this huge gap, and there's a risk that's specifically the area that we're worried about is our kindergarten or first grade, our eighth grade going into high school, our ninth graders who just started high school for the first time, and our seniors who are supposed to be graduating, right? There's those students who are failing in those areas could have really traumatic effects long-term, right? Just based on data, right? Historical data shows us that. And so those are the areas that we're really like focusing on, right? And so what are we doing for students who are failing? Do we pass them? Do we move them along? The answer is this. We're wrestling with that. Not everyone has an answer to that yet. And the reason why is because everyone has a different situation. And again, this goes back into the empathizing and mobilizing and balancing accountability with empathy, right? And so for me, right, my personal opinion about it is I have a problem graduating someone who hasn't mastered competencies, right? Like if you haven't mastered a certain skill set that prepares you for college, it is an injustice for me to graduate you from high school. Like I think it's an injustice. Like it's a crime to me to graduate a child who has not mastered a skill set. Now, the reason why they mastered the skill set is not necessarily their fault, right? They're dealing with a situation. It's not their fault. However, as an educator, it is not right, even though it is not your fault, for me to graduate you and move you on to the next level. So if we know that, right, I put the focus back on the educators. What can we do if we know we're not going to move a kid who hasn't mastered content or mastered a certain skill set? What can we do and put in place that can kind of incorporate and make sure that they're learning the skill set? And it may not look like a traditional education. If I don't go to school from September to January, I miss half the year, but I come the second half of the year and I learn something, I might have to push you. I might have to make it happen for you because I'm not going to keep you back based on what happened in this world. That's the empathy part, right? But if you've been coming to school from September all the way to June and didn't do anything, and you haven't proven anything, and you just haven't made any type of effort, I'm not going to do that, because what's going to happen is you're going to lean on it's the pandemic's fault. And there's no accountability in it. I'm not doing my job as an educator, holding you accountable to ensure that you've learned the skill set for you to be prepared to go to college or post-secondary, wherever you're trying to go. I haven't prepared you for that. So that's my fault for just moving you along. And what's going to happen is when they move along, they're going to fail even more because they weren't prepared. They didn't learn those skill sets. And so that's where we have to find that balance of, what do we do? So right now, the school district of Philadelphia is, again, we're trying to figure it out. We've considered doing a fifth quarter. So, there's 4 quarters in the school year. We've considered doing a fifth quarter in a school year where we actually have school all throughout the summer so that we can catch kids up and still graduate them. But again, that costs funding, that costs money, which we don't have. And so we have to figure that out. So we're still trying to figure that out.
With the funding,
there is $16 billion into the COVID bill that has been passed that goes to certain parts of those education.
Yes, but if you look at the funding formula, see, that's another thing. There is not an equitable funding formula by state by
Oh, no,
state.
it's no equitable
Never
distribution.
has been, and by
Right.
county by county.
Right.
Exactly.
The Philadelphia County will not receive as much money as
Right.
you know
And
the
that's why I'm saying
Poconos.
don't applaud this thing.
It
Yeah.
does not receive as much as
throw it out,
Chester County.
right. So when you
Or
throw it out
Delaware County.
there and talk about it, right? Talk about this COVID relief thing, and then you throw out the funding part. And then now the doctor comes in and says, no. When you look in the weeds of it, it ain't gonna help us. See, and that's why I'm saying we got to be clear when we're talking about this and when we're applauding and patting them on the back. So and we talk about where do we go, right? I tell you, one of the most impactful books, and Doctor, I don't know if you read it. I'm getting through it now.
Eric,
The
this
doctor-
is the after show. Make it quick.
I've just sat here, Vincent, and listened to the whole. I just want 2 seconds.
Okay.
Right? Thank you. So where do we go from here? Dr. King's book is a very insightful book. And I think that we need to separate where we say that people are complaining versus people just expressing disappointment. I think that Dr. King wasn't complaining. I think he was expressing disappointment and talking about the issues and still fighting to try to make change, right? And so we can't be shamed into not pointing the fingers where they need to be pointed, and at the same time try to do what Dr. Johnson is doing. And so where he's looking for relief and looking for help from these faith-based organizations or these failed nonprofits in the community that are supposed to be doing work, he's got to say, you guys are not doing your job.
Okay. Well, thank you, Eric. You really passed that 2-minute mark. Again, into the after show. Dr. Johnson, I know we got you for a couple of minutes. So real briefly, for those people who will not be in that gratuitous funding part of the urban area and this COVID budget, what do they need to do? Who do they need to contact? And what do they need to do to make that money get to our kids?
Use their voice. I don't call the shots. I'm not the one saying where money's going. I talk to the mayor, show up to the city council meetings, use your voice. That's the greatest weapon that we have at this point. Speak your piece. When voices are heard, decisions get made differently. That's what I've come to realize. And so, I know that there's a lot of unions already making their fight towards city council for more funding for education in Philadelphia. I back those unions, both teachers and school administrator unions. I back all of it, and to be honest with you, even the school district of Philadelphia is fighting for more funding from the city, from our governor, and we have to wait to see what will happen, but that fight is being fought, and it probably needs to happen in Jersey and everywhere else too. They got to use their voice.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Listen, Dr. Johnson, it has been a true blessing having you on the show. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
you have changed a great deal of mindsets, and I'm looking forward to the great work. And I want to keep in touch to see how we're going to do with these scholarships. I'm looking to these kids
Absolutely.
really impacting our world.
I really appreciate
Vince,
you all.
Vince, before we go, I'd like to ask Dr. Johnson a question.
If he's got time.
Okay, it'd be real brief. Look, I mean, we're off the main show now. It's a little bit more relaxed. But listen, brother, you got to tell me, Dr. Johnson, vice principal, how old are you, man?
I'm 38 years old. I'm 38.
Oh, okay.
I was going to guess 19 years old.
If I look younger than that, that's a blessing. I'll take it.
Okay. Hey, man. Hey, brother, I'm proud of you, man. I really am. I really am.
My sister just sent me a message. She said, "Are you married?"
I am. I've been married. I'm about to be 13 years in October. Married to a beautiful woman. Yeah, Elaine. Yeah, that's my queen.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Real.
Yeah.
Can't repeat what she texts back.
Okay. Don't get the doc in trouble now.
Yeah, don't get me in trouble.
Imam, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, right.
All right. Okay, so Eric, why don't you close us out?
I thought this was insightful. I want to thank you, the wise ones. You guys are always, you offer perspectives that I think that the listeners and the viewers enjoy. And Dr. Johnson, you are on the front lines, man.
Really?
And I see it as a war, and you're bandaging people up. encouragement, and you